So next we have a presentation from Emyria Limited with the ticker code EMD, a company that uses industry-leading data collection to find solutions to unsolved medical problems. To tell us more, I'll hand you over to our Managing Director, Dr. Michael Winlo.
Thank you, Jane. Good morning or good afternoon, and pleasure to speak with you all today. As Jane mentioned, EMD is a drug development company. We're tackling some of the world's most emergent and serious challenges in mental health and neuroscience. We're using some of the most innovative molecules to tackle those diseases that are showing some real promise, but which lack the usual evidence. And we are approaching this by also being heavily involved in the frontline care of patients, which provides a chance for us to get health outcomes, but also learn from those patients and take those learnings into our drug development programs as well. And so we have really 4 shots on goals. We have 2 leading cannabinoid, ultra pure cannabinoid programs that are pursuing late-stage clinical studies and approaching commercialization. We also have a number of assets and approaches in the MDMA therapy space, both the establishment of a leading network here in Australia to deliver MDMA-assisted therapy for patients with severe treatment-resistant PTSD, but also setting up that network in order to learn from those patients as well and take that data to support the generation of next generation MDMA analogs to support these challenging conditions as well. A couple of highlights about our company. We have the support of 10 Mile. This is Andrew Forrest Private Wealth Fund investment group. It's a subsidiary of Tattering. They have been great supporters of our company and own about 8% of the register. We're pretty tightly held with the top 50 holding more than 70%. We work with novel proprietary formulations of ultra pure. This is lab-based synthetic CBD to create our drug development programs. And we also have this interest in MDMA analogs, and we believe we have one of the world's largest libraries of unique chemical compounds inspired by MDMA with huge therapeutic potential as well. And I'll take you through those programs in detail in this presentation. First of all, we're tackling related conditions to anxiety and tackling our CBD programs forward against these indications. Generalized anxiety disorder is the #1 mental health condition in the world globally. The last few years have been really challenging, and we've seen the incidence of this condition only rise. Nearly 80% of patients who are on treatment for anxiety suffer some side effect of their medication as well. So there's a real need for a safer treatment with fewer side effects that's also really effective. We're tackling this at both ends of the spectrum here. We have low-dose CBD, which we're pursuing for over-the-counter registration for mild symptoms of anxiety. And we also have a high-potency prescription strength CBD program that we're taking forward that we believe will have potential for prescription anxiety-related disorders as well. We're also backing that program up with an interest in the MDMA space, and we've been preparing for this for a couple of years. The recent rescheduling of MDMA by the TGA, a world-first move to recognize MDMA and psilocybin as having therapeutic potential, has really accelerated this program for us. And so we're moving quickly to establish a leading national network of psychiatrists where we can provide MDMA-assisted therapy for patients with treatment-resistant PTSD. But we want to do it in such a way that we are really thoughtful. We're learning from patients as we go. We're taking that data towards novel drug development as well. And because MDMA is such a versatile molecule, it interacts with many different areas of the brain, we have the opportunity to tune its selectivity and elicit different kinds of therapeutic responses, which we believe can help us tackle conditions like the symptoms of Parkinson's treatment and others as well. So we're tackling multiple billion-dollar opportunities with some really unique innovation, and we're being guided by the data we're gathering from patients while we're caring for them, which makes us a really unique biotech company. So here's our model kind of laid out in a high-level structure. We've been caring for patients under the subsidiary of Emerald Clinics for some time. We've treated more than 8,000 patients, as young as 2, as old as 100, more than 40 different clinical indications. We've studied those patients closely, and that data is what's guiding and informing the drug development and the clinical trial program for our ultra-pure cannabinoid medicines. We're also establishing the same kind of model, leveraging our insights from Emerald Clinics to build a psychiatrist-led network to provide MDMA-assisted therapy to patients as well, but at the same time, paying attention to how those patients are doing using that data to inform novel drug development and care model innovation. We believe we can generate revenues as well as insights in doing this. And why is real-world evidence so important? Well, when we first IPO'd 3 years ago, we would give the quote that 45% of FDA approvals had some kind of real-world evidence accompanying them. This is the evidence that's gathered outside the clinical trial environment. That number shifted to 78%. It'll be close to 100% within a few years. And this is in recognition that clinical trials don't look like the real world. And so the results of clinical trials, as compelling as they might be, don't often translate to the real world health outcomes. And so people are interested, regulators particularly, in how does a drug perform with real patients, with all of their complications and nuances. And so we're really been very focused and invested in gathering that data. We have an exceptional board that's done this kind of work before. A couple of highlights here: Professor Sir John Tuke, ex-president of the Academy of Medical Sciences, knighted for his services to medicine, an ex-advisor to Google DeepMind, has been a key advisor on our board, setting up their learning health system, and Dr. Karen Smith in the top right, a biopharmaceutical executive based in the United States, chief medical officer, ex-chief medical officer, and global head of research and development at Jazz Pharmaceuticals, a notable company in our industry because they acquired the only cannabinoid registered medicine in the world to date, that's Epidiolex, for $7.2 billion back in February 2021. And she's very interested clearly in the way we're approaching our drug registration programs. So as I alluded to, Jazz Pharmaceuticals paid an enormous amount of money for the only registered CBD drug in the world. It's currently generating more than $1 billion a year. It's a CBD oil. It treats a rare form of epilepsy, and it came to the market after a huge investment of time and effort and many clinical trials to achieve its FDA registration. So we know that there's a commercial upside if you can have a properly registered performing CBD product. The challenge today is we've been sort of flooded in Australia, especially with CBD products that are largely undifferentiated, where the quality is not quite there, the potency is variable, and almost none of these products have performed the clinical research required to obtain registration. And so there's a gap here, and we are tackling that gap using really good data gathered from our clinics, using those insights to make pharmaceutical grade synthetic CBD products that we believe are registrable. And then we're putting those products to work in clinical studies, guided by our real world evidence, of course, to achieve registration and large commercial returns and big patient impact. And we're focused on the anxiety disorders. Why is that? Well, that's where our evidence and also the published literature presents the most compelling case for where CBD has a benefit. We know that there are product limitations and shortcomings, which we're addressing in our program. And so we have both an OTC program and a prescription program tackling that space. We know our OTC, our solid oral dose form, is really performant. We've gone head to head with Epidiolex, that billion-dollar medicine. We know we can deliver equivalent amounts of medication, but we have less variability. We have a slower release profile. We have really favorable clinical advantages and features which we think will make this a very attractive and successful over-the-counter product. And then those insights also support our prescription program as well. The OTC program's in phase 3 studies. It'll due to conclude in July. We will have a clinical readout a few months later, and targeting mild symptoms of anxiety and stress in patients with pain, but then big opportunities after that successful registration to expand our indications, to expand our global markets at each step, being informed by the clinical evidence we've already gathered on many thousands of patients from our clinic. We also have a prescription program, a very high potency, high bioavailability dose form of ultra pure CBD as well, and targeting a number of prescription indications for that program. And so now you can see we are kind of bookending anxiety. We'll have an option over the counter for mild anxiety. We'll have prescription program for the more serious anxiety disorders. And also I should note, we have the support of the National Institutes of Health in the United States, who are funding a preclinical screening program for pain for this EMD-RX7 program as well. They were compelled by our synthetic preparation, the registrability of that dose form, the patient preference of a solid oral capsule, and also the compelling real-world evidence that we had provided to them that demonstrated that cannabinoids could make an impact in opioid use amongst patients with chronic pain. So that's a fully funded, very sophisticated preclinical program that's running at all cost to the NIH. So the next 12 months looks like this. We are in advanced commercial discussions for the OTC program. We'll conclude our trial in July. We expect to have TGA registration and the clinical efficacy readout following conclusion of the study, and then readouts from our preclinical program with the NIH playing alongside that, and also preparations and the commencement of a phase 1 study for the RX7 program as well. So lots to look forward to on the cannabinoid front. And that's half our story, really, and I'll go through quickly on the MDMA front, but the TGA changed the rules around psilocybin and MDMA just a few weeks ago, recognizing these previously illegal drugs as having therapeutic potential. They handed the keys to specialist psychiatrists, the only group allowed to prescribe this medication. And so also insisting on the development of a care plan, a monitoring system, reporting processes, and properly trained therapists in order to give this treatment. So I won't spend much time going deeply on MDMA, but just to point out that it is a compound with some really unique qualities. It greatly releases or increases the release of serotonin, dopamine, and noradrenaline, which results in increased feelings of compassion, sociability, alertness, decreases fear and defensiveness. And those qualities have made it a very attractive party drug, but also an incredible adjunct to psychotherapy, particularly for things like post-traumatic stress disorder. And so what people are seeing in these really difficult to treat patients with PTSD are incredible clinical outcomes in major phase 3 studies. In fact, there's been 2 of them completed in the United States with a group called MAPS, who've really pioneered research here to show that 80% of patients will have a clinical significant response. Nearly 2/3 of patients have a full remission from their PTSD symptomatology after just 3 intense sessions. But MDMA-assisted therapy is difficult to deliver, requires a lot of therapist time, up to a full day per patient. The sessions last a long time, and there's quite a lot involved in doing it as well. So we see this as an opportunity for Emyria to take our learnings from our Emerald Clinics experience, our drug development capabilities, and actually work on really bringing this therapy to patients who need it through the establishment of a national network, but also working in the background to make improvements to MDMA itself so that we can actually produce faster acting MDMA and MDMA that may have fewer unwanted side effects. So we can see ourselves as having a coordinating function here, teaming up with groups like the PAC Center, Complex Trauma Specialist Group, providing drug supply, which we've already secured, developing the care plans, taking care of the data and monitoring infrastructure. In exchange, there is a revenue opportunity, but also importantly, a data generation opportunity that can support the novel drug development program that's coming up behind it. And so that program is done in partnership with the University of Western Australia. We're taking MDMA as inspiration. We're making structural changes. We're getting different kinds of effects. We're tuning the selectivity of that compound, and we're seeing huge potential for a range of neurological disorders, and one in particular I'll pay attention to. So just a few slides to go. One of our goals is faster acting MDMA. It would be very valuable to have an MDMA that was as potent, but came on more quickly and subsided more quickly as well, allowing therapists to perhaps turn these sessions from 8 to 12 hours into 2 to 4 hours. So you could actually double the number of patients you see, potentially have a safer outcome as well. So there's a massive commercial interest and need for a faster acting MDMA. We're starting to see that we can actually break down MDMA much quicker than MDMA itself, showing proof of concept that it is possible, likely, that we can make a faster acting MDMA. The second space we're playing in is really, really fascinating, and that is based off this anecdotal finding that patients with severe symptoms from Parkinson's treatment, called L-DOPA-induced dyskinesia, can have a remarkable improvement in that symptom with the addition of MDMA. So here's a video that I'm playing now of Tim Lawrence. He's a stuntman from the UK who has severe Parkinson's disease and has a lot of side effects from his L-DOPA treatment, the most common treatment for Parkinson's. About 80% of patients will develop the symptoms that Tim's displaying on the left here, which is this jerky, shaky movements of the arms and legs. These are uncontrollable, involuntary movements that can appear 80% of Parkinson's patients who take L-DOPA. And so what Tim discovered one Friday evening was that when he took MDMA at a party, all of those jerky, uncontrolled movements subsided, and he had smooth muscle control once again. And so really, really fascinating discovery that's since been sort of replicated in others as well. And so what we're out to do is see whether we can remove the high. Let's remove some of the amphetamine effects and the euphoria, but let's preserve some of the important motor control features that MDMA can provide. And the early discovery work is starting to show that is possible. And so here's some clinical data readouts from one of the earlier compounds in this family, UWA 101, showing to improve that smooth movement by 30%, which is huge. And we know that there are commercial drugs out there that now have PBS coverage, expected to generate $300 million a year just in the United States, that improve that on time by only 6%. So we know there's a commercial precedent here. There's demand for a drug that can do this even more effectively. And we believe we've got one of the very best candidates in that space. I won't sit on this one too long, but let you know that we've got multiple families and tackling some really major unmet needs. What to look forward to on the MDMA front, particularly the analog space, after the establishment of the network. On the analog front, more compounds, growing the library, preclinical screening, selection of our very best lead compounds in preparation for IND-enabling studies and phase 1 trials. So here's us in a nutshell, tackling some major unmet needs, mental health and neuroscience, each of them billion-dollar opportunities, using some of the most innovative compounds that exist. And some of those are in pretty advanced stages, including our CBD program already in phase 3. We're got a really favorable reg environment with the changing of the TGA rule, which opens a pathway for registration and reimbursement for our analogs. And we also have a substantial preclinical pipeline coming up behind the scenes and an excellent team with FDA approval track record to support us through. So thank you for your time and attention. I welcome any questions.
Michael, thank you for the great presentation. We've had a few questions, so I'll jump into it.
Sure.
So what would a transaction in the USA with a major partner look like?
Yeah, I guess it depends what program you're talking about. On the MDMA analog front, there is a precedent of preclinical assets selling for large upfronts, big royalties, and milestone payments as well, particularly in neuroscience and in mental health, and that's the space we're playing in. If it's on the CBD front, I think it's more of a distribution licensing agreement, again, with upfronts and some milestones based on commercial outcomes with a royalty attached to that. And they're the kinds of transactions that we're contemplating and exploring.
And Michael, I know you touched on this through your presentation and you've got a very exciting year ahead, but do you mind just maybe reiterating to the attendees on the expected news flow that you can, that they can look forward to over the coming months?
Yeah, great to summarize that. Clearly much to keep an eye on here, but on the cannabinoid front for the OTC, it's commercial partner, conclusion of the trial, TGA submission, approval on that front. On the prescription CBD program, it's readouts from the preclinical program of the NIH, our phase 1 program, and then pre-IND initiation registration. On the MDMA front, 2 things there. We want to be ready for the first patient July 1st when the new rescheduling comes into effect. So getting that network ready to treat patients and be ready to go. And on the analog front, readouts from the preclinical program and selection of our lead assets.
And just on that then, so what excites you most about the company?
Well, I guess we get the real privilege of seeing some, frontline real patient outcomes and benefits from the clinical work that we do and working with our clinical partners. That's tremendously motivating and obviously keeps us energized. But I'm particularly intrigued by MDMA and where it can go next. I think we're just seeing the tip of the iceberg of what's possible for that molecule. It's been under-researched because of its illegal status. It's small. It does fascinating things in the mind. And I think it's giving psychiatrists particularly a completely new toolbox for tackling, some of the most serious and challenging conditions of our time and for problems which for a long time have really had terrible, options, to be honest. And so this is very, very exciting on that front.
Wonderful. Michael, that's all we've got time for today. Again, if webinar attendees do have any further questions, please feel free to reach out via the contact details on the bottom of the ASX releases. But thanks again for your time.
Thank you, Jane. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.